My sister got a brand new white Porsche with a giant red bow on Christmas morning, and I got a worn $2 bill and a note that said, "You already have everything. Learn to be grateful." I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even argue. I simply vanished. And within hours, their perfect holiday began to collapse. How did it get to the point where one gift exposed an entire family's lie? My name is Lindsay Floyd. I'm 35 years old, and I work as a senior financial manager at an insurance company in Cincinnati. Numbers are my language. Balance sheets make sense to me when people don't. And for 4 years, I lived a double life. One version of me at work, confident and capable, and another version at home, silent and invisible, quietly holding my family together in ways they never bothered to notice. The drive from Cincinnati to Columbus should have taken 2 hours. On Christmas Eve, with holiday traffic crawling along I-71, it took nearly three. 3 hours alone with my thoughts, my doubts, and something in my purse that felt heavier than it should have, a small leather note too. That notebook wasn't sentimental. It wasn't a diary filled with dreams or heartbreak. It was a ledger, dates, amounts, confirmations. Every time I'd bailed my family out, every time I'd stepped in so they wouldn't fall. And even though I'd never shown it to anyone, I'd kept it like proof that my exhaustion wasn't in my head, proof that I wasn't being dramatic, proof that I hadn't imagined how much I'd given. Because here's the thing about being the reliable one. People don't thank you for reliability. They depend on it. They build their comfort on top of it. And eventually, they start treating it like air, something they're entitled to breathe without ever acknowledging where it comes from. It started 4 years ago, after my mother had a minor stroke. I still remember the hospital smell, cleaner and fear mixed together. I slept in a chair beside her bed for 3 nights straight. On the second night, she squeezed my hand, eyes glossy, voice weak but urgent. "Lindsay," she whispered, "you're the strongest one in this family. Promise me you'll keep everyone standing while I recover. Promise me." What daughter hears that and says no? So I promised, and that promise quietly became my role, my identity. At first, it was small things. My parents had let the home insurance lapse, so I covered it $1,200 a month. My father's credit cards kept getting away from him, so I paid the minimums, then more, then entire chunks whenever the balances got too high. Roof repair after a storm. Medical bills insurance didn't cover. "Just until we catch up," my mother would say. Just for a little while. Little while turned into years. Then there was my sister, Megan. Megan is 32 years old, and if you've ever met someone who always seems to be starting over, you'll understand her instantly. She'd work part-time retail jobs, quit when a manager didn't respect her, bounce to another store, and call it self-discovery. My parents called her sensitive, like she was fragile glass in a world of hammers. Megan got patience. Megan got understanding. Megan got second chances, stacked on top of third and fourth chances. And me? I got silence. 2 years ago, I arrived early for Sunday dinner and paused outside the kitchen without meaning to. I heard my name, so I stopped. Megan's voice floated out, casual and careless, like she was talking about the weather. "Lindsay has money," she said. "Let her handle it. I'm still building my life." And then my mother laughed, a soft little laugh that made my stomach drop. "You're right, sweetheart," my mom said. "Lindsay's always been fine on her own, fine on her own." As if being capable meant being less human. As if not asking for attention meant not needing love. I told myself to let it go. I told myself they didn't mean it like that. I told myself they were stressed. They were older. They didn't realize how their words landed. But words don't have to be intentional to be damaging. Early December, my mother called me, and her voice sounded different, lighter, almost sweet. "I want this Christmas to be special," she said. "A healing Christmas, all of us together again like a real family." I didn't believe her. Not fully. But there was a small part of me, some stubborn little girl still living in my chest that wanted to believe. The part that still remembered sitting at the kitchen table as a kid, hoping my mother would look at me the way she looked at Megan. Hoping I'd be chosen, even once. So I decided to give them one last chance. One final test. I bought gifts, careful gifts, expensive enough to matter, personal enough to show effort. A cashmere scarf for my mother, a golf accessory set for my father, a delicate bracelet for Megan. Almost $600 total, because even after everything, I still wanted to be seen as loving, not bitter. I packed my car. I drove to Columbus. I walked into their house smiling like I wasn't bracing for disappointment. Christmas morning started, like it always had. Coffee, cinnamon rolls, the familiar smell of sugar and tradition. For a brief moment, standing in the kitchen with warm steam curling from my mug, I let myself hope. Maybe healing was possible. Maybe my mom meant it. That hope lasted exactly 47 minutes. My father appeared in the doorway, grinning like a man who couldn't wait to show off a secret. "Everybody grab your coats," he announced, clapping his hands. "We're going outside. Family tradition." I didn't remember any tradition that involved going outside on Christmas morning, but I followed because that's what I always did. I followed their lead. I stayed agreeable. I kept things smooth. Megan bounced on her heels like a kid even though she was 32. My mother's eyes were bright. My father already had his phone out, camera ready. I grabbed the bag of gifts from the living room, thinking maybe we were doing some kind of outdoor exchange. Something new, something meaningful. The cold air slapped my cheeks as we stepped onto the porch. The house looked beautiful, twinkling lights, wreaths, the whole thing like a holiday postcard. And then I saw the driveway. A brand new white Porsche Cayenne sat there gleaming under the winter sun, a giant red bow perched on top like a commercial. My father started recording immediately. My mother clasped her hands under her chin, tears forming. Megan froze, then screamed. Not a gasp, a full scream. She ran to the car, ran her hands over it like it was sacred, then sprinted back to throw herself into my parents' arms. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart," my father said, voice thick with pride. "You deserve a fresh start." They hugged, they cried, they laughed. Christmas music blared from a speaker like someone planned the soundtrack. Photos were taken, videos were recorded. My sister sat in the driver's seat pretending to steer while my parents beamed like they'd just won Best Family Award. And I stood behind them all, holding my bag of gifts, and not a single person turned around to look at me. Not once. When we finally went back inside, my hands were numb from the cold. I don't think anyone noticed I wasn't wearing gloves. I set my gift bag on the coffee table and watched the room buzz around Megan's new car like she was the sun and we were all supposed to orbit her joy. Then my mother turned toward me, holding a small envelope with my name written on it. For a second, my heart did something stupid. It lifted. It hoped. I took the envelope and opened it carefully, like it might contain something fragile. Inside was a worn $2 bill and a handwritten note. "You already have everything. Learn to be grateful." Megan leaned over my shoulder and laughed. "You don't even have a husband or kids," she said. "What would you need a nice car for?" The room went quiet just for a moment, and nobody corrected her. That's when I understood the truth, clean and sharp. I wasn't the strong one they respected. I was the invisible one they used. I smiled. I placed the envelope on the table next to the gift bag I'd spent $600 on, and I walked out the door without a word. Because if I stayed, I would either break or beg. And I was done doing both. I sat in my car for a full minute after I left, hands resting on the steering wheel like I didn't trust them to move yet. My breath fogged up the windshield. The house behind me glowed with Christmas lights, the kind that look warm from a distance and feel cold when you get close. I could still hear faint music through the walls, cheerful, loud, confident. The kind of sound a family makes when they believe nothing can touch them. Inside that house, they thought I was sulking. They thought I was being dramatic. They thought I'd cool off and come back inside like I always did, smiling politely, swallowing whatever hurt they handed me. But something in me had gone quiet. Not the quiet of acceptance. The quiet of a decision being made. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. My finger hovered over the list of automatic payments I'd set up over the years, payments that had become so routine I barely noticed them anymore. Like breathing, like a heartbeat, like something that had always been there. Except it hadn't always been there. It started with my mother's stroke and that promise in the hospital. It grew from just a little help into a structure my entire family stood on. And while they were out there filming Megan's Porsche moment, they didn't realize the foundation they were standing on was finally done holding. I didn't rage delete everything in a burst of emotion. I did it slowly, one by one, with the same calm precision I used at work when I closed accounts. Home insurance cancel. My father's credit card cancel. Megan's credit card cancel. The monthly transfer labeled emergency fund cancel. I stared at the screen after each one, expecting guilt to punch me in the chest. It didn't. What I felt instead was something I hadn't felt in 4 years. Relief. Sharp, clean relief, like stepping out of a room that had been suffocating you for so long you forgot what oxygen felt like. I drove straight to my best friend Karen's house in Cincinnati. Karen is the kind of friend who doesn't demand explanations when your eyes look empty. She opened the door, took one look at my face, and immediately stepped aside to let me in. She didn't ask, "What happened?" She just handed me a glass of wine and said, "Guest room's ready. You can talk when you're ready." That kind of kindness, quiet, uncomplicated, almost made me cry harder than the insult had. I slept in her guest room wrapped in lavender-scented blankets, phone on silent for the first time in years. No late-night anxiety. No bracing for another emergency. No scanning my screen for my mother's name like it was a fire alarm. But even in that peace, my brain kept circling the same truth. They didn't know what they'd done. Not fully. They didn't know they'd handed $2 to the person who'd paid their bills for 4 years. They didn't know that their strong daughter had been quietly bleeding money and energy into their lives while being treated like background noise. And that's when I remembered my notebook. The small leather notebook in my purse wasn't dramatic. It was practical. But it was also my proof. Every payment, every transfer, every bill, every date. Because I'm a financial manager, I document, I track, I build receipts the way some people build arguments. I pulled it out on Karen's bed and flipped through it slowly. December, 4 years ago. First mortgage payment, then insurance, then credit cards, then roof repairs, then hospital bills. Page after page of my life being converted into numbers that kept someone else comfortable. The total, as of last month, $87,340. And the worst part wasn't even the amount. It was the fact that I had made that many payments without ever hearing the words thank you even once. Not from my parents. Not from Megan. Not from anyone. Because, in their minds, I was fine. I didn't need appreciation. I didn't need recognition. I didn't need love expressed in any way that cost them something. I drifted off near dawn, but by the next afternoon, my phone began vibrating nonstop, even on silent. I didn't look immediately. I wanted to savor the quiet. But eventually I flipped the phone over and saw the missed calls stacking up. 1, 2, 7, 12. By evening, it was 23. 23 times they tried to reach the daughter they had dismissed with $2. When I finally listened, the voicemails played like a timeline of panic. My mother first, tight, annoyed. "Lindsay, call me back. The insurance payment didn't go through. Something is wrong." My father next, confused, embarrassed. "My card was declined at the gas station." "I don't understand. Did the bank freeze something? Call me." Then Megan, furious. "My phone service got cut off. What is happening? You need to fix this." Fix. That word told me everything. They didn't call to ask if I was okay. They called because something in their life stopped working, and I was the invisible mechanic they expected to repair it. Karen watched me sit at her kitchen table the next morning, coffee cooling in my hands, as my phone buzzed again and again. She asked gently, "Are you going to answer?" And I surprised myself by saying, "No." Not out of spite, out of self-preservation. Because I knew the moment I answered, my mother would cry, my father would blame, Megan would lash out, and I would fall back into the role that had been killing me slowly. The fixer, the provider, the one who smooths things over. So instead, I opened my laptop. I started pulling bank statements, transfer confirmations, receipts, anything that matched the notebook's entries. If they were going to accuse me of ruining Christmas, I needed facts that couldn't be argued with. I wasn't building this document to demand repayment. I wasn't suing anyone. I wasn't trying to destroy them. I was protecting myself from the story they were about to tell. Because families like mine rewrite reality the moment it becomes inconvenient. They don't say, "We ignored you for years." They say, "You abandoned us." They don't say, "We used your money." They say, "You never told us you were struggling." They don't say, "We humiliated you." They say, "You're too sensitive." So I built the truth into something permanent, a clean, organized 12-page report. Every dollar, every date, every reason. A silent testimony that couldn't be interrupted or twisted. And when my hands started trembling slightly over the keyboard, not from fear but from the finality of what I was doing, I realized this wasn't just about money. It was about visibility. For 4 years, I had been invisible by choice, believing silence made me strong. Now I was about to show them what my silence had been paying for. And once they saw it, nothing in that family would ever be the same again. Not their Christmas. Not their illusion. And certainly not me. On December 26th, while I was wrapped in Karen's spare blanket pretending the world had finally gone quiet, my father was standing at a gas pump staring at a screen that refused to cooperate. Declined. He tried again. Because men like my father always believe authority will fix itself if you repeat the request with more confidence. Declined. He tried another card. Declined. Later, in a voicemail he left me, I could hear the humiliation hiding underneath his anger. He talked too fast, blamed the machine, blamed the holiday, blamed fraud alerts. Anything but the possibility that the system had worked exactly the way it was designed to work once I removed myself from it. Meanwhile, Megan's emergency arrived in the most Megan-shaped way possible. Her phone shut off. No service, no data, no access to the digital audience she needed to witness her happiness. She couldn't post photos with the Porsche, couldn't upload the video of herself screaming in the driveway, couldn't reply to the flood of heart emojis from friends telling her she was so lucky, so loved, so blessed. Without a signal, her Christmas miracle lost its spotlight. And that, more than anything, sent her spiraling. I didn't hear this firsthand. I learned it the way family news always travels through leaks, through mutual friends, through the dramatic retellings of people who had front row seats to someone else's collapse. By mid-afternoon, my mother had opened an email from the home insurance company, warning that the payment hadn't processed and coverage was in jeopardy. I imagine her sitting at the dining table, the glow of the laptop making her face look smaller, the confidence from Christmas morning draining out of her one sentence at a time. She called me again. "Lindsay, sweetheart," she said, voice tight. "Please call me back. Something is wrong. Something is wrong." It amazed me how often people say that when the wrong thing is simply the truth arriving. At Karen's house, I pressed play on the voicemail while stirring sugar into my coffee. The spoon clinked gently against the mug. Karen watched my face, cautious, like I might shatter if she spoke too loudly. But I didn't shatter. I felt steady, because for the first time, their panic made sense in proportion to my effort. For 4 years, I had lived inside small emergencies, constant, private, exhausting. Now the emergencies were loud and public and impossible to ignore. Now everyone could see what happened when I stopped catching them. By evening, my father had done something he should have done years earlier. He looked. He logged into their account history and started scrolling. Payment after payment, vendor after vendor, month after month. My name attached to so many transactions it must have started to feel unreal, like discovering a secret second income stream he had never questioned. But it wasn't income. It was me. Roof repair, hospital, credit cards, insurance. Megan, again and again. I try to imagine what his face looked like as the numbers climbed. I wonder which entry made his stomach finally drop. Maybe the medical bills from Mom's stroke. Maybe Megan's balances stacking up year after year. Maybe the total at the end, $87,340. When Karen's friend told her later, she said my mother started crying in a way she had never cried before. Not elegant tears, not emotional theater, real grief. The kind that happens when denial runs out of places to hide. My father went quiet. And Megan? Megan, apparently, had nothing to say. For once, she wasn't the sun in the middle of the room. She was just a person sitting in the light of what she'd allowed. The next day, December 27th, my parents confronted her. "How could Lindsay be paying your bills without you knowing?" my mother demanded. And I wish I could tell you, Megan leapt up in horror and said she had no idea. But she didn't. She hesitated. And then she admitted it. "I knew she helped sometimes," she said. "I just thought that was between you guys." Between you guys. As if I was a service provider. As if the arrangement floated in the air without weight or cost. As if knowing and staying silent weren't choices. My mother stared at her. "You knew your sister was paying and you never thanked her?" Megan's defense came out fast, familiar, rehearsed by years of protection. "She has money," she said. "I'm still building my life." Those words again. The same ones I'd overheard in the kitchen 2 years earlier. Hearing them repeated, after everything, must have sounded different to my parents now. Less reasonable. More rotten. Because suddenly, they were no longer cushioned by my support. Suddenly, Lindsay has money. Didn't solve anything. The argument that followed tore open old fault lines. My father blamed my mother for treating Megan like a princess. My mother blamed my father for wanting to be the hero with the Porsche. Megan cried that everyone was attacking her. No one took responsibility in a clean, graceful way. Families rarely do. But beneath all the noise, a simple truth was surfacing. They had built their lives assuming I would never leave. And now I had. At Karen's place, my phone kept buzzing. I watched the screen light up and go dark, like a lighthouse warning ships about rocks that were already hit. I should have felt powerful. I didn't. I felt sad in a tired, ancient way. Sad that it took collapse for them to notice me. Sad that my worth finally became visible only when it disappeared. But I also felt something else. I felt done. Not furious. Not vindictive. Just finished. Because once someone sees exactly how much they've been taking from you and still tries to argue about fairness, you understand there's no conversation left to have. That night, Megan sent me a text. "This isn't fair. You left at the worst time. You're doing this to hurt us." I read it twice. I didn't answer. Because what I wanted to say was too honest, and honesty, in my family, had always been mistaken for cruelty. I wanted to say, "I didn't leave to hurt you. I left because staying was hurting me." But they weren't ready to hear that yet. Maybe they never would be. Back in Columbus, the house that had glowed like a movie set on Christmas morning now felt smaller, colder, louder. Reality had moved in. And reality doesn't care about bows or speeches, or who cries the prettiest. Reality just adds the numbers. And without me, the numbers no longer worked. The truth about the money was devastating, but it wasn't the worst truth. The worst truth surfaced in the middle of shouting, accusations flying across the living room like shattered glass. It came from my father, and from what I later pieced together, he didn't even mean to say it out loud. Some secrets don't arrive with ceremony, they escape. My mother kept repeating that she had always believed I was fine, that I didn't need extra help, that I was the capable one, the independent one, the daughter who would land on her feet no matter what. And finally, my father snapped. "That's exactly why you signed that will," he said. Everything stopped. Megan looked between them, confused. "What will?" Silence swallowed the room. I imagine my mother's hands going still, her mouth opening slightly, the air turning heavy in that particular way it does when the past refuses to stay buried. My father rubbed his face, already regretting it, but the door had opened. 3 years ago, he said slowly, we updated our estate plan. No one spoke. Megan was waiting, probably expecting a reassuring answer, something flattering, something that placed her safely in the center again. Instead, she got arithmetic. 90% to you, my father admitted. 10% to Lindsay. I try, sometimes, to picture the moment Megan processed that. Did she feel guilty? Relieved? Entitled? I don't know. What I do know is the reason behind it, because my mother explained it through tears later. "She's self-sufficient," Mom said. She doesn't need us the way Megan will. Self-sufficient. There it was again. The family myth. The halo they placed over my head so they could comfortably leave me in the dark. What they meant was simple. Lindsay survives. Megan requires. So, resources flow toward need. It sounded logical. Responsible, even. Except it erased one inconvenient detail. I was the one paying for them. The will had been signed the same year I began quietly transferring money month after month, stabilizing their lives without announcement or praise. While I was emptying my savings to keep them afloat, they were drafting a future where I would receive almost nothing in return. I didn't hear the revelation firsthand. It reached me the way most family disasters do, filtered through phone calls, through Karen's connections back home, through fragments of disbelief repeated until they formed a picture. When I finally understood, I didn't cry. I felt clarity settle over me like snow. Of course, they gave Megan 90%. In their version of reality, Megan was the fragile one, the one life happened to. I was the sturdy one, the one life leaned on. My stability disqualified me from care. My competence made me invisible. They weren't trying to hurt me. They simply didn't see me. And strangely, that hurt more. I sat at Karen's kitchen table with my laptop open, the half-finished document glowing on the screen. 12 pages of transactions, years of proof, evidence of love expressed through bank transfers because I hadn't known any other language would be heard. But now I saw the problem clearly. They had mistaken my silence for agreement, so I needed to break the silence in a way that couldn't be interrupted. Not a phone call, not a fight, paper. I spent the morning attaching statements, labeling dates, organizing categories, mortgage, insurance, medical, Megan, totals in bold, clean, undeniable. My training took over. When executives at work argued emotionally, I built spreadsheets. Facts don't shout. They stand. At the top, I wrote a message. Not dramatic, not cruel, just honest. I'm not sending this to ask for repayment. I'm sending it so you understand something important. I was never fine. I was never okay. I was just silent. I had to pause after typing it, because reading it felt like meeting myself for the first time. I added another line at the end, the one that had been growing quietly in my chest since Christmas morning. Silence is not strength, and being used is not love. Then, almost as an afterthought, I told them about Denver. The job offer had come before Christmas. Finance director, 40% raise, real opportunity. I hadn't told them because I knew what would happen. They'd congratulate me warmly and then calculate how much more I could afford to send home. My success, in that family, had always come with a bill. But Denver wasn't an increase in capacity anymore. It was an exit. Starting next month, I'm moving, I wrote. I need to build a life that belongs to me. My finger hovered over send longer than I want to admit. Because once truth leaves your hands, you can't soften it. You can't edit it for comfort. I hit send. The email flew to my mother's inbox, carrying 4 years of reality with it. I closed the laptop. Karen squeezed my shoulder and refilled my coffee. She didn't congratulate me. She didn't say I was brave. She understood something better than praise. I was grieving, not for the money, for the fantasy, for the idea that maybe if I just kept giving, they would eventually notice. My phone buzzed an hour later. Then again. Then again. I let it. When I finally listened, my mother sounded smaller than I had ever heard her. I didn't know, she whispered, but she had known enough to hand me $2 and a lecture about gratitude. She had known enough to believe I required nothing. And knowing that, I realized something that steadied me completely. Intent didn't erase impact. They might not have meant to erase me, but they had. So, I didn't call her back. Instead, I created a new folder on my phone. I named it Proof. Inside it, I saved everything. The voicemails, the texts, the missed calls. Because families like mine don't surrender narratives easily. When the dust settles, they search for ways to repaint the past. I wasn't going to let them. In the days that followed, the financial consequences kept tightening around them. Deadlines, notices, cancellations. the world shrinking down to what they could actually afford without me. And somewhere in the middle of their panic, I began to breathe differently. More deeply, more freely, because for the first time in my adult life, I wasn't waiting for the next request. I wasn't bracing. I wasn't responsible. I was just a person, a daughter who had loved, a woman who had given, and finally, someone who had stopped. January arrived without ceremony. No music, no twinkling lights, no giant red bows pretending problems were gifts. Just numbers, due dates, and the kind of cold that doesn't care how badly you wish things were different. On January 2nd, the bank called my parents about the Porsche. 8 days. That's how long the miracle lasted. Without my monthly transfers quietly absorbing the rest of their chaos, the math unraveled fast. The loan payment was over $1,000, and that was before gas, insurance, maintenance before the reality of ownership replaced the fantasy of presentation. My mother left a voicemail that afternoon, her voice stretched tight between panic and denial. "Lindsay, honey, there must be some mistake. They're saying we missed the payment." A mistake. I sat at Karen's kitchen table with sunlight pooling across the wood and listened to her message all the way through. I didn't interrupt the recording. I didn't roll my eyes. I just let it exist in the air between us. There was no mistake. There was simply life without me. 3 days later came the notice from the home insurance company. Final warning. 2 weeks before cancellation. I pictured my father pacing the living room, phone pressed to his ear, trying to bargain with representatives who had never met me and didn't care about family narratives. He probably used phrases like temporary, misunderstanding, we just need time. But time was what I had already given them. 4 years of it. Time, money, peace of mind. And now there was none left to borrow. The Hawaii trip collapsed next. The deposit gone, flights useless. My mother had talked about that vacation for months, sent links to hotels, described the view from the balcony as if standing near an ocean could wash away whatever we refused to fix at home. Megan cried for days, I was told. Not about me. About the beach. Karen brought me tea the night I heard that detail, and I laughed not because it was funny, but because it was so perfectly consistent. Megan didn't mourn relationships. She mourned experiences. She grieved aesthetics. She grieved how things looked. Without the Porsche, without Hawaii, without a phone signal, she had to sit in a life that suddenly felt ordinary. And ordinary terrified her. My own days, meanwhile, were growing strangely simple. I woke up without dread. I made lists for the move to Denver. I filled boxes. I answered onboarding emails from my new job. I bought winter tires and thought about mountain air. Yet Columbus remained like weather in the distance, rolling toward me in waves of vibration across my silent phone. Dad blamed Mom. Mom blamed Dad. Megan blamed me. "This is your fault," she texted one afternoon. "You picked the worst possible time to leave." I stared at that message longer than I should have. Because there was a version of me, an old reflex that wanted to explain, to defend, to soothe, to say I hadn't left at the worst time. I had left at the first honest time. But explanations are invitations, and I was done inviting them to negotiate my pain. So, I deleted the message. Back in Columbus, my father finally did something radical. He stopped rescuing Megan. He called a family meeting and told her they couldn't keep up the car payments. She was responsible now, completely. She cried. Of course. She said they couldn't do this to her. She asked what she was supposed to do. I almost answered out loud in Karen's living room. Grow up. Instead, I heard later that my father handed her a calculator. For the first time in her 32 years, Megan had to line up income against expense. No imaginary cushion, no invisible sister smoothing the edges. Part-time boutique salary. Maybe $1,500 on a good month. Car, over $1,000. Insurance, gas, minimum payments. She moved numbers around, tried different combinations, probably hoping math might pity her. It didn't. The truth stood there, blunt and patient. She couldn't afford the life she believed she deserved. And underneath that, an even harder realization began to form. She never had. My mother's voicemails kept evolving. First anger, then negotiation, then apology, then something quieter, just crying, sometimes without words, as if language had finally failed her. I saved every one of them. Not for revenge. For memory. Because I knew someday someone might try to compress this story into something smaller, something easier to forgive. And I needed evidence that the pain had been real. Karen worried at first that listening would break me, but it did the opposite. Each message anchored me further into the certainty that leaving had been necessary. Their voices were full of shock because they had never imagined consequences applying to them. But consequences are not cruelty. They are information. Mid-January brought the envelope Megan had been dreading. Repossession. 30 days. The same car that had sparkled like proof of love was now a liability with a deadline. I tried to imagine the driveway empty, the absence louder than the engine ever was. I didn't celebrate. I didn't enjoy it. But I did recognize the symmetry. You can't build a future on someone else's sacrifice and expect it to stay parked forever. Before I left Cincinnati, I wrote one more email. I'd considered calling, thought about giving them the intimacy of my voice, but I understood something now. My voice had never protected me. Documentation did. So I wrote, I'm not cutting you out of my life. But from now on, we only have a relationship if there is real respect. And respect is shown through actions, not panic. I will not give financial support again. If you want to see me, I'm open to it, but I will not come back to being the silent solution. I read it 3 times. Changed nothing. Hit send. Then I loaded the last box into my car. As I pulled onto the highway heading west, I waited for grief to hit me like a wave. I expected doubt, guilt, regret. Instead, I felt space. Room in my chest where fear used to live. I rolled down the window even though it was freezing and let the wind slap my face awake. For 4 years, my life had been reaction. Now, finally, it was direction. And somewhere behind me, in a driveway that no longer held a Porsche, my family was learning the same lesson I had. You don't notice the weight someone carries for you until they put it down. Denver did not greet me with fireworks or dramatic music. It greeted me with altitude, thin bright air, and a skyline backed by mountains that looked almost unreal, like a painted promise someone had hung at the edge of the world. When I unlocked the door to my new apartment, the emptiness inside echoed in a way that should have felt lonely. Instead, it felt honest. No one in that space expected anything from me. No bills were secretly waiting for my account number. No emotional emergencies were hiding behind polite greetings. There was just a quiet room, a balcony, and the beginning of a life that did not already belong to someone else. The job was everything they had said it would be. Finance director, bigger team, bigger responsibility, 40% more salary. At the office, my competence meant authority. It meant respect. People listened when I spoke. They thanked me for staying late. They asked how I was doing. I kept waiting for the catch. There wasn't one. In the mornings, I stood on my balcony with a mug of coffee and watched the sun slide up behind the Rockies, spilling gold across the peaks. It became a ritual, that view, a daily reminder that distance could be beautiful, not cruel. I started therapy 2 weeks after I arrived. Her name was Dr. Reyes. Gentle voice, sharp eyes, the kind of person who could see the truth behind your rehearsed strength. The first session, I spent almost the entire hour explaining numbers, how much I paid, how often, how it added up, why it made sense. She listened patiently, then asked, "And where were you in all of that?" I didn't understand the question. "In your own life," she clarified. "Where did you exist besides solving everyone else's?" I had no answer. So I cried. I cried in a way that felt embarrassing at first, because I wasn't used to being the one who unraveled. I was the organizer, the fixer, the calm one. But Dr. Reyes handed me tissues and said something that cracked open a door I didn't know I was allowed to walk through. "Being strong doesn't mean carrying everyone," she told me. "Sometimes it means putting them down." I carried that sentence home with me like medicine. Back in Columbus, reality continued its slow, unsentimental work. Without my money smoothing things over, my parents' life shrank to its actual size. They sold furniture, canceled subscriptions, returned things that had once made them feel successful. My father picked up consulting hours he had previously turned down. My mother started cooking at home, clipping coupons, comparing prices in a way she hadn't done since we were children. It wasn't tragedy. It was proportion. Megan returned the Porsche at the end of January, 30 days after the notice. I heard she cried when she handed over the keys, that she stood in the driveway afterward looking smaller somehow, like someone had turned down the volume on her confidence. I tried to imagine how that must have felt to lose a symbol of being chosen. I understood it better than she ever knew. Then came the part none of us had practiced. Megan got a full-time job. Not glamorous, not a dream. An entry-level position at an insurance office. 40 hours a week, fixed schedule, supervisors who expected her to show up whether she felt emotionally ready or not. For the first time in her life, she began experiencing the weight of her own maintenance. I won't pretend she transformed overnight. Growth is slower than humiliation. But according to the updates filtering through Karen, she kept going back. She learned the software. She packed lunches. She paid her own phone bill. Small things, but real. In February, something else shifted. My father contacted the family lawyer and revised the will. 50-50. The lawyer mailed me a copy for my records. When I opened the envelope, my hands were steady. I read it once, slid it into a folder, and put it away. It wasn't victory. It was recognition. Late, complicated recognition, but still. It meant they could no longer pretend I was made of air. 2 months after Christmas, my phone rang with a Columbus area code. I almost let it go to voicemail. Part of me liked the control of choosing when to hear them, but something softer, more curious, pressed answer. It was Megan. Her voice was unfamiliar, quieter, stripped of its usual sparkle. "Lindsay," she said, "I need you to let me talk." So I did. "I knew," she continued, breath uneven. "I knew you were paying for things. I told myself it wasn't my place to question it. I told myself you were okay with it, but I see it now. I see what that meant. I see how I let it happen." She paused, and in the silence I could hear office noise in the background. Phones, printers, life, moving on. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," she said. "I just needed you to know I finally understand." Understanding. Such a small word for such a late arrival, but it mattered. I leaned back in my chair, stared at the mountains beyond my window, and chose my response carefully. Because reflex would have rushed in with comfort, with absolution, with immediate reunion, but healing built on speed collapses. "Thank you for telling me," I said. "But change isn't proven in a conversation. It's proven over time." She inhaled sharply, like she had expected either cruelty or rescue, and got neither. "I know," she whispered. We ended the call without ceremony. Afterward, I sat there for a long time, surprised by the tremor in my hands. Not from anger, from relief. Because for the first time, Megan had spoken to me like a person she had hurt, not a resource she had lost. Later that evening, I walked through downtown Denver and passed a boutique window displaying a handbag I had admired for years. I had always told myself I couldn't justify it, that the money should go somewhere more necessary. That night, I walked inside. I bought it. When the cashier handed it over, wrapped in tissue paper, I felt something strange and unfamiliar. Not indulgence. Permission. I carried it home under the wide Colorado sky, the city lights flickering on one by one, and I realized I was learning a new language. One where care could flow toward me, too. Back in Columbus, my family was still adjusting to gravity. But in Denver, I was finally learning how to stand, without holding anyone else up. And for the first time in years, the future did not feel like a debt. It felt like mine. For a long time, I hated the word revenge. It sounded ugly, petty, small, like something done in the dark by people who wanted others to hurt the way they had hurt. But as winter in Denver slowly gave way to the early hints of spring, I began to understand something uncomfortable. Sometimes, what looks like revenge from the outside is simply the moment someone stops volunteering to be mistreated. The difference is invisible unless you are the one finally walking away. I thought about Megan's phone call often, about the tremor in her voice when she said she understood, About the way she didn't ask for forgiveness, didn't beg me to come back, didn't try to turn herself into the victim of my absence. It was new, fragile. And I treated it the way you treat something fragile. You don't squeeze it too hard, and you don't trust it to carry weight yet. Dr. Reyes warned me about this stage. She called it the gravity shift. The moment when the family system starts reorganizing itself around the fact that you are no longer available on demand. They will try to pull you back, she said gently. Not always with cruelty. Sometimes with love. That sentence haunted me more than any accusation, because love had always been my weakness. If my mother cried, I moved toward her. If my father sounded disappointed, I explained myself. If Megan struggled, I solved it. I had built my identity on being the bridge everyone else could walk across. Now the bridge was gone, and they had to learn how to swim. The calls from Columbus didn't stop, but they changed. My mother started asking about Denver, about my apartment, about the view from the balcony. She told me what she cooked for dinner instead of what bill was due. My father asked about my job in a stiff, careful way, like he was practicing respect and didn't want to mispronounce it. They were trying. I saw it. But trying doesn't erase memory. Trust, once cracked, doesn't flow back in. It returns in drops. One evening in March, after a particularly long therapy session, I walked downtown without a destination. The air still held winter in it, but the sun lingered longer, refusing to disappear too early. I passed restaurants, bookstores, people laughing in doorways, and I realized how many lives existed where I wasn't the emergency contact. It felt revolutionary. Then I saw it. The handbag. Same display window, same soft lighting, same quiet temptation I had denied myself for over 2 years. I remembered every time I had stood outside stores like that and calculated how many insurance payments it could cover, how many credit card minimums, how many small rescues. I had always walked away, because someone else needed it more. But standing there now, something shifted. What if I needed it? Not the bag, exactly, but the permission. I went inside. My heart beat too fast, like I was doing something reckless instead of something ordinary. The saleswoman smiled, asked if I wanted to try it on, treated me like a person allowed to want beautiful things. I paid. No guilt followed. No mental list of who I was depriving. I walked back into the street holding that shopping bag and almost laughed, because I understood the truth so clearly it startled me. This was what my life looked like when I was included in it. Back in Columbus, the changes were slower, heavier. My parents had stopped pretending I would come home and fix things. The expectation of rescue had been replaced by something awkward but healthier: responsibility. They budgeted. They argued about money honestly. They lived inside limits that were theirs, not subsidized by mine. Karen told me once, "They're finally meeting reality without you buffering it." That was exactly it. I had been the emotional shock absorber of the Floyd family. Every impact softened by my presence. Now they felt the road. And pain, it turns out, is an efficient teacher. But even with progress, there were moments when the old script tried to reappear. My mother would say, "We just miss you so much." And I would hear underneath it, "We miss how things worked when you were here." My father would talk about how hard everything had become, and part of me would want to offer relief. Just a little, just temporarily. That's when Dr. Reyes's voice would echo in my head. If you step back in, you reset the system. So I stayed where I was. Kind, polite, unmovable. I began to understand boundaries, not as walls, but as instructions. They told people how to love me without destroying me. They filtered who could come close. And the most surprising thing? The people who truly wanted me in their lives started learning the rules. Megan kept her job, month after month. No dramatic exits, no grand reinventions, just steady attendance. Sometimes she texted me small victories, figuring out her taxes, negotiating her car insurance, cooking dinner instead of ordering out. I didn't throw confetti, but I noticed. Because change isn't loud. It's consistent. One afternoon, while I was reorganizing books in my living room, I realized something so simple it almost made me sit down. They were afraid of losing me now. Not my money. Me. For years, I had feared abandonment. I had given and given because I thought if I stopped, they would let me disappear. Instead, the opposite had happened. The moment I walked away, they finally turned toward me. It didn't erase what they had done. It didn't magically heal the loneliness of all those years. But it changed the balance of power. I was no longer begging to be valued. They were trying to prove I already was. And that was when I knew something fundamental had shifted. I hadn't ruined Christmas. I had ended an arrangement. And in the space that followed, something more honest had the chance to grow. About 3 months after Christmas, my past showed up in my lobby. I wasn't expecting it. The doorman called my unit and said there was a woman downstairs asking for me. He described her as older, nervous, someone who had been sitting in her car for a long time before finally coming inside. He said she looked like she might leave if I didn't answer soon. I knew before he said her name. My mother. For a moment I just stood there in my kitchen, phone in my hand, heart moving in 2 directions at once. Part of me wanted to say I wasn't home. Part of me wanted to go downstairs and wrap my arms around her like none of the last months had happened. Both impulses were dangerous, because one would erase me, and the other would rush something that needed to walk. "How does she look?" I asked. "Tired," he said gently, "like she's been crying." I closed my eyes. Old reflexes stirred. Go comfort her, fix it, make it easier. But another voice, the one I'd been building slowly in therapy, in distance, in quiet mornings on the balcony, whispered something steadier. "You are allowed to listen without surrendering." I pressed the button to unlock the lobby door. When she stepped out of the elevator, she seemed smaller than I remembered. Not physically, exactly, but emotionally, as if the certainty she used to carry had drained away, leaving something more human in its place. She didn't rush toward me, didn't try to hug me. She stopped a few feet away, like she wasn't sure she was permitted to come closer. "I'm sorry," she said immediately. No speeches, no excuses, no rehearsed justifications. Just those 2 words, raw and unprotected. "I was so focused on Megan," she continued, voice trembling, "on worrying she wouldn't be okay, that I stopped seeing you at all. You were the one who held us together, and I treated you like you needed nothing. I never thanked you. I never asked what it cost you." There it was. Cost. I felt the word move through me, like something unlocking. For years I had tried to explain that love had a cost when only one person was paying it. I had tried to say that strength didn't mean endless supply. Now she saw it. Too late to undo it, but not too late to admit it. I didn't cry. I didn't collapse into her arms. But I also didn't turn away. "I hear you," I told her. It sounds simple, but those 3 words were enormous. They meant I was present. They meant I was willing. They did not mean everything was healed. She nodded, as if she understood the distinction. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she added. "I just needed to say it to your face." I let her come inside. We sat at my small kitchen table, 2 women who loved each other but had finally run out of ways to pretend love alone was enough. She looked around my apartment, at the framed prints on the wall, the mug by the sink, the coat thrown over the chair. "You've built something beautiful here," she said. I almost laughed. I had built it because I finally stopped building them. We talked carefully, about Denver, about her drive, about practical things, like the weather and traffic, because big emotions require scaffolding before they can stand. Before she left, she said, "I want a relationship with you, a real one, not one where you disappear for us." I appreciated that she didn't say, "Come home." She had learned something. After she left, I stood on the balcony for a long time, the wind moving against my face, the mountains quiet and ancient in the distance. My chest felt tender, like something bruised but healing. Peace didn't arrive like fireworks. It arrived like permission to breathe. 6 months after Christmas, my mother came again. This time she called first. This time I invited her in without hesitation. We made tea and sat outside watching the sunset stain the Rockies gold and violet. We didn't talk much, but the silence between us was different now. It wasn't packed with expectation. It wasn't waiting for me to fix anything. It simply existed. A beginning. I realized then that reconciliation doesn't mean going backward. It means building something new from pieces that survived the truth. I still had boundaries. I still kept my independence. I still said no when something felt wrong. But I was no longer running. And neither was she. Back in Columbus, the changes held. My father kept working. My mother kept budgeting. Megan kept her job. Their lives were smaller, yes, but they were honest. And honesty turned out to be sturdier than illusion. Sometimes Megan would send me updates. Nothing dramatic, just normal life. A promotion possibility. A recipe she tried. A bill she paid off. I answered warmly, cautiously. Trust, like I had learned, grows in repetition, not declarations. One evening, after my mother's second visit, I stayed on the balcony long after the sun disappeared. The air cooled, the city lights flickered on, and I thought about the woman I had been a year earlier. Exhausted, invisible, certain that love required sacrifice without limit. I wanted to reach back through time and take her hand. I wanted to tell her something she didn't yet know. Walking away doesn't always end a family. Sometimes it's the only thing that gives it a chance to become one. I didn't cut them off. I cut off the version of me that believed being needed was the same as being loved. And from that Christmas forward, something fundamental changed in the Floyd family. No one ever dared treat me like the daughter who needed nothing again. Not because I proved my worth with money, but because I proved my absence had weight. I stood there, under the wide Colorado sky, breathing in air that belonged entirely to me, and felt something settle gently into place. Not triumph. Not revenge. Peace. The kind you earn when you finally stop disappearing. When I think about everything that happened, I don't see a story about a Porsche or a $2 bill anymore. I see a story about visibility. About how easy it is to disappear inside a family role, to become the reliable one, the strong one, the endless giver, and how dangerous that can be when no one remembers you're human. Lindsay didn't destroy her family. She removed the cushion that kept them from feeling the truth. And once they felt it, everyone had to grow. Maybe you saw yourself in her. Maybe you're the person who always shows up, always fixes things, always pays emotionally or financially, while someone else receives the applause. If that's you, I hope this story reminded you that love without respect is not love you have to keep accepting. Walking away isn't always revenge. Sometimes it's the first honest conversation you ever have. If this journey stayed with you, if it made you pause, breathe, or rethink your own boundaries, I'd love for you to be part of our community. Subscribe to Hanjiwea Iyagi for more stories about real people, hard truths, and the quiet courage it takes to choose yourself. And until the next story, remember, your presence has weight. Don't let anyone treat it like air.